You're listening to Zen Sammich, a podcast for the independent mind and anyone who embraces life despite its absurdities. Join former attorney and professor-turned-Japanese papermaker Mark Reed each week as he talks with creative, inspiring, and influential people, or as he shares his own research to help make your world a little better today than it was yesterday.
So my guest today wears a lot of hats. She's a podcaster. She's been a healthcare professional and a writer. She's a leader, a coach, an influencer. She's a Latina, a powerful and uplifting voice for Hispanic women. She's even been called a chingona recently. I won't call her that unless she wants that title. It does carry some controversy depending on who you ask. But I asked her to come on the program to get a different perspective. You see, when folks think about the word Zen, thoughts and images of quiet, serenity, calm, peacefulness, things like that come to mind, right? But quiet and calm are not words I would generally use to describe Raquel Raqi Flores. By her own admission recently, she is an assertive voice that, quote unquote, commands your attention when she's in the room. I believe that's how she phrased it recently on another podcast. It is certainly true. But Zen is much more than those descriptions I mentioned. In truth, those short-sighted definitions merely scratch the surface, because Zen is also about authenticity. It's about being real and observing life as it truly is. In that way, I would say Raqui Flores is very much Zen. She's a realist, a straight shooter. She might be a Zen master for all I know. I am delighted to have her share her story and mission with us today. She joins me now from Houston, Texas. Welcome, Raquel Flores.
My goodness. Thank you so much, Mark. After that, I'm just like, okay, he said it all. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's all, folks. Well, go to zensammich.com, donate to the show, and that's the whole podcast. No, because your story is fascinating, and I want people to hear it. Before I dive right into that, though, teach us gringos how to roll the R's. How do I do it?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So I know you do a great job at it, Mark. So I really appreciate that.
I really don't. But go ahead.
So usually I tell people, yes, the name, you can call me Raquel, but you have to inject some more flavor into that. And, the spiciness of being a Latina. So for me, if you call me Raquel, so you have to really get in there.
How do I do that?
Raquel.
I'm impressed, but you're not telling me how to do that.
You really have to relax the tongue and let it roll. Let it roll.
Okay.
Yes. So, it's one of those things that I ask people, go ahead and roll that R, roll it, or roll it like it says. And they're like, yeah, I can't do it. I'm like, it takes time. It takes practice.
I teach English sometimes in Japan, and English R's are difficult for Japanese people. And for me, I'm like, why don't you get it? Why don't you understand it? And I like draw diagrams. Like, here's where your tongue is in relation to your teeth and the top of your mouth when you do an L versus an R. Because Japanese people, they just don't have that sound. So it's really hard for them. But now I'm on the other side of it. I understand their frustration because I can't do that Spanish sound. Anyway. Well, while you and I share some of the same audience, Raqi, a little bit, like in the the Hounds of Business and group and the LinkedIn universe, who might know who you are, there are actually a lot more who will listen to this show who might not know anything about you. So let's start with that, with your basic story. You were born in El Salvador, and your parents immigrated to the United States at one point without you, right? Tell us that story. How old were you? Why did they come to the United States? And you were separated from them for like 7 years, right? Give us that background.
Absolutely. So was born in El Salvador. This, United States, Houston is my second home. But the Civil War that really ravaged through El Salvador lasted 11 years. And it really caused so many senseless deaths, over 75,000. And that included, women, men, and children. So my parents at that time, they had a a business. They were entrepreneurs, and with the guerrilla, just with everything that was going on, it was not sustainable to have a business. They would be shut down, everything will be closed, and so they decided that it would be best for them to migrate to northern horizons and search for a better life for my two brothers and myself.
So was
And
it, not to interrupt, but well, I am. Was it just a financial reason? Was there any fear of like physical harm or like drug lords or something like that, or was it just like we can't make it here financially?
At that point, it was more the financial, right? There was the gangs weren't
Right.
they didn't exist at that point, right? It was not like no drug thing. No, it was more
Okay.
political, right?
Okay.
And the fact that it was financial, that political affected the financial. So
Right. Okay. And then how old were you when they left?
I was 3.
Okay, so
Yes.
you were too young to know what was going on.
Yes, I don't recall. I don't have memories of that. And then again, I think I actually have selective memory, that I don't remember some of the aspects of the cruelty that I saw and that I
Yeah.
experienced in El Salvador during my childhood. And some kids are able to remember, when they were 4 or 5, and I'm like, I have no memories of that.
Yeah.
Not In addition to the separation, though, what happened the following year after my parents actually arrived to the United States is my older brother, he passed away. He drowned in a
Oh.
freak accident in a river. So I have no memories of him. And
Oh, wow.
sometimes I tell myself, like, I'm mad at life for not allowing me just that closure to remember him in my memories.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think it's also a gift that I don't remember him like that, because then it would hurt even more.
Right.
My other brother, who's alive, who's here with me in Houston, he remembers him. Obviously, he's the one who saw him go under.
Wow.
And but he was younger, he couldn't save him. So if he had tried, he would have gone under as well.
Man.
So it's one of those stories that really nobody knows.
Yeah,
So I'm sharing
I
it
didn't
with
know that
you.
about you. Yeah, I didn't know that. Wow, thank you for sharing that. Is that
Yes,
so your living sibling, is that your only other sibling or do you have others?
that's correct. It's my other
Okay.
one. Mhm.
Okay. So you were in El Salvador from 3 to 10, and what, your parents show back up to come get you?
Right. So after my parents immigrated, they spent like honestly, 3 long months in the Mexican desert, fighting to live. The story of their crossing is in itself a book. I may release that book later on in life.
Mm.
But they arrived here. They started working like many of those who immigrate in the agricultural farms, agricultural fields, picking anything that you can think of.
Mm.
And then at that point, it was Reagan's amnesty who
Hmm.
like helped him get legalization, and they were able to get the documents for us. And I set foot here in 1993. Almost,
Okay.
like I said, 7 years later, my mom went back for us
So you were
with
10.
documents in hand, and I was 10.
Could
Mhm.
you speak any English?
Not at all. The only thing I think I could say was thank you. That was it.
Wow. Because you don't have an accent. I mean, you got like just a hint of like Latina flavor, but
Mhm.
your grammar is perfect and you sound like a native English speaker, but you didn't start until you were 10.
I didn't start until I was 10, and my acculturation and my assimilation process was very difficult, to be honest with you. And I cannot imagine how much more difficult it was for my brother, because he is 4 years older than me. So the
Right.
older you get, the harder it is to learn new things. But for
Where?
me, when I was 10, I really vowed to myself that I was going to make my parents' sacrifice count.
Mm.
I was going to honor them and become what they call a woman of good. In Spanish, they say una mujer de bien.
Mm.
So, and I told myself I will learn the language as
Hmm.
best as I can. I will become a highly educated woman, and I believe that I've done justice to to their
Of course.
sacrifice.
You wouldn't be here on Zen Sandwich if you didn't. Do you think primarily in Spanish or English?
And that is the funniest thing. I do think primarily in Spanish, and I'm much more expressive in Spanish. So sometimes you see me kind of hesitant when I'm doing interviews, either I'm a guest or I'm hosting.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I want to say this, but it's not really literally translated to English. English
Yeah.
is much more restrictive when it comes to expressing, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's the same with Japanese. Maybe
Yeah.
not.
Well, actually, English is a little more flexible than Japanese. So there's
Okay.
kind of only one way to say certain things in Japanese, and that's not due to my limited vocabulary. Really, there's like, you know, it really depends. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because there's actually a lot of words that exist in Japanese that don't exist in English at all. And so, like,
Hmm.
I teach, I primarily teach English, but I actually teach one guy here Japanese. His Japanese is just on a very elementary level. And instead of him
Hmm.
picking up a native Japanese speaker, I actually teach him Japanese because I know what his brain is thinking. So I know how
Hmm.
to explain it to him. Like, yeah, man, you can't think about it. I mean, you obviously can think in English and you
Hmm.
think in Spanish. That's why I asked that question. You know,
Hmm.
he's not at that point. He's still thinking in English and then translating it to Japanese. And I'm trying to tell him,
Gotcha.
like, you gotta start to just like adopt it and think in Japanese. That's the
Yes.
only way to do it.
Yeah, but no, to answer your question, I primarily think in Spanish and then I have to translate it to English. But needless to say, in some certain topics, that obviously are more ingrained towards my life here, I do think in English. It's so weird, but it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. It's like a gift piece I've heard.
Yeah. There are definitely times now where the Japanese pops in my head faster than it does the English, because I
Mm.
just use it more. Like if I'm speaking with my wife, like I don't ask, like, are you okay? Like, let's say she stubs her toe because she's Japanese. I'm more apt to say, like, daijoubu desu ka? Like, ii desu ka? Like, are you okay? And because I use
Mhm.
that more than saying, are you okay? Now I might say that I might be on a Zoom call with somebody and go, daijoubu desu ka? And they're like, wait a second, they don't know what the hell I'm saying. Anyway, enough about that.
Yes.
Well, I actually do want one more question on that topic. Do you dream
Hmm.
exclusively in Spanish or is it mixed?
It's mixed.
Yeah.
Yes, it's mixed. Hmm.
Awesome. How do you think those early experiences you had? Well, and before I go to that question, what did you think when you're 10 and your parents show up and you haven't seen them in 7 years and you don't really remember them? Like, or were you like, who are these people? Or did you just immediately embrace them like, oh, this is mom and dad?
So it's funny that you asked me that because I had to really dive deep into those early years of my life, looking back and knowing that they left us, right? My mom and my dad came here to the
Hmm.
United States and they left us under my paternal grandmother's care.
Hmm.
And so that's all I knew. Once my mom shows up 7 years later, it was only my mom who actually went back.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, okay, this is my mom. This is my mom. I don't have any memories of her. The only thing that we used to do back then is phone. We didn't have video calls. We didn't have anything. So I used to
Right.
talk to her and they used to tell me, that's your mom. That's your mom. That's your dad. And so when we were raised, my grandmother's was a Jehovah's Witness. So
Hmm.
I was pretty much kind of like told this, you have to be respectful. I grew up in that and it's very
Right.
restrictive. So and as soon as my mom showed up, it's that bond, it's
Hmm.
there, but obviously there are other aspects of that bond that needed to be worked on. And that's what we did during my teenage years and during my young adulthood life.
Hmm.
But yes, I mean, I don't have any memories of them during that time, to be honest with you. I just knew that they were my parents and I had
Yeah.
to honor and respect them.
So having gone through all that stuff so early on, uh, how did it, how does it ultimately shape your perspective on life and resilience? I mean, do you feel like I did that in my earliest formative years? I can handle anything now. Or
Mhm.
is it the other side where there's this lingering residual anxiety about the uncertainties of life, like the unpredictability of what's going to happen next? Or, I don't know,
Right.
do you feel more anxious because of it? Or do you feel more secure in who you are because you went through all this stuff?
I would say at a few years ago it would have been a mixture of both, but now it's more the latter. I've come to my own. I've learned so much about me and my resilience in the face of adversity, based on those earlier traumas that sometimes I would say I'm still healing, that this is a healing journey, being able for me to talk about these things, it's healing in itself, because I know that I was not the only one who went through this, from the thousands and thousands of families who immigrated out of El Salvador because of the war. And me sharing my story on LinkedIn and other platforms has really opened up other people to speak up about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you went through the same thing. Like, how amazing, how did you do it? What have you gone through? So we're able to really talk to one another at that level where we resonate, because we live a shared experience, right? A life experience. But it has filled me with so much compassion for others, because of all the suffering that I saw when I was a child. I mean, gosh, like seeing somebody, like dead bodies, waking up the next morning, having to sleep under a mattress because, there were helicopters that were shooting in the middle of the night, having to see the shell, the casings of the gun, the gunfire the next morning. It's like, those are things no child should be exposed to at that time, or anyone for that matter, right? But having experienced hunger, extreme poverty, growing up with no electricity, these are things that we take for granted. And I mean, I see it in my girls, I see it in my kids, and I'm like, y'all just don't know. Y'all have it so good. I used to work picking cotton. I used to work picking coffee when I was 8, when I was 7. And that was the value of work that my parents instilled in me. And I'm grateful for that. Right. But at the same time, I think of it like, we shouldn't be in that situation. But again, the environment shaped who I am. That doesn't mean that it defined, just because I grew up in seeing so much hatred, so much craziness, that I'm going to act the same way towards others. No, it's on the contrary. I believe, because I suffered so much that I don't want to see people suffering. It breaks my heart to see people go hungry, people, just fighting for petty stuff. I always ask myself, why can't we just all get along? Black, white, blue, brown, green, whoever. I have love for everyone. And I think you've grown to see that, that I get along with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that your mission is to empower women entrepreneurs and to, help be an influence on Hispanic community, Latinas. Who inspired you in that regard? Who did you look up to, or who do you still look up to as an inspiration?
I'm going to say that as an advocate for Latinas, I really didn't have anyone growing up. And I'm talking about when I was learning English, ESL student, middle school, high school, and college. I really didn't have a role model or a figure that I would say, I want, like, oh my gosh, I want to be just like you, or I see myself in you. But I have to go back and credit my parents for everything that they instilled in me, the value of honesty, remaining, humble, and working hard, right? But not necessarily working hard with your hands. And it's like I told him, yes, you guys have worked so hard throughout your entire life to build this, or give us this better life. But with me, I want to be able to redefine that, the narrative. I want to work hard, but with my brain, with actions, with putting efforts out there that it will change lives and impact them in a positive way. So one of the reasons why I focus completely on, it's my heart's mission to focus on Latina women, just because I know the cultural battles we have to go through, the cultural chains that sometimes bind us to very archaic mentalities, the mindset of the machismo and all of that. I'm here to redefine that narrative for us, because we have so much talent, but we're often unseen because we're expected to take a backseat. So to me, it is definitely very important. Education, fundamentally going back to education and being able to provide that and being an advocate for Latina women all over the world.
Yeah. What advice would you give to an aspiring woman entrepreneur or a Latina entrepreneur who's just starting her journey, facing self-doubt and all the obstacles that you've overcome? And specifically, what would you say to the introverts out there? Because, I mean, you do have an assertive voice. You do have a strong presence. What about people who, would you just say, get over it, get in there and do it, make your voice heard? Or what's your advice to young
Absolutely.
Latina entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that, it's a sad statistic. And I hope that we change that in the decades to come. But young Latinas, Latinx, Hispanics, however you want to call them, you just know that it's Latinos in general. But young Latinas are the highest, they have the highest rate of dying by suicide because, and I completely understand why, because we feel unseen, we feel not unvalidated, like our efforts, we're just in the back, like in the back seat again, and we are afraid to speak up because of so many of those cultural anchors that hold us back. To me, one of the basic things is, you have gifts and natural abilities that the world is yearning to see. Have the courage to speak out, to speak up, right? I know how scary it is. I've been there. I was silent for 10 years until I decided enough is enough. Do I really want to live with the guilt of knowing, looking back on my deathbed and saying, oh, I wish I would have done that? Or do I want to say, I did it, I tried it, it didn't work out? Then you step back and you try a different route. So for you, it's just having the courage to just do it. Yes, it sounds very cliche, right? I'm saying that, but if you don't, then there will be no momentum. There will be no wind to lift you up and continue propelling you to the future. So that was what in general. I know everybody's case is different though.
What's your long-term vision? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish?
As far as a global effort, I definitely want to see more Latina women in positions that are powerful positions, right? Leading forces, leading global efforts for education, for healthcare, for technology. We have so many bright minds, but again, we are not seen because we're afraid to speak up. Yeah. So being able to advocate for Latinas, being able to have just satellite offices all over the world, that empowers. And I keep saying Latinas, but I know sometimes that really my message cross cultural boundaries, and I love that, and I love it. So
yeah, I think you're a voice for any oppressed group of people. It doesn't have to be a Latina. It could there might be a young African American male or something, or anyone that faces a more difficult path than well, I hate to say it, but a white guy, I don't want to, I try to stay away from controversy here, but I think it'd be more controversial if I tried to deny that there was some sort of privilege of being white male in America. So I think your voice, yes, you're speaking to Latinas, but I think it would be inspiring to any marginalized group that faces, obstacles.
Yes. And you're right, because I've been reached out, from India, individuals from India, and saying, your message resonates, like your story is so inspiring. We're going through that in a remote village, and I'm trying, these are individuals who are trying to just be different, right? They're trying to help that cultural curse stop, the generational curse stop with them. So, and obviously, it's difficult because you will be met with so much adversity. You will be met with so much resistance. But that is where the power lies. If you continue trucking to that resistance, knowing that at the end of the day, you will be, contributing such an amazing, positive thing for those who are going to come after you, and you're leading the way.
That's awesome. Well, Raqi, what else you got going on? How can people find you? I know you got a bunch of stuff going on. Tell us about your podcast,
oh my goodness,
your writing project, everything, and how can people find you?
Absolutely. So the main thing right now, it is Hispanic Heritage Month. We're definitely celebrating and kicking off so many projects all over the country because, again, I love celebrating my Latinaness. But celebrating all over here in Houston, we have so many different events going on. Tejano Tech Summit 2023, but that's more locally. Globally speaking, I have my podcast or live stream every Saturday on LinkedIn. It's called Raquel Flores Connection Corner, and basically, I I interview individuals who are doing wonderful things for the world. This month, I'm focusing on Latinos mostly, but in general, I focus on people who are just change makers, global, ambassadors who
Yeah.
are just doing fantastic things, whether they have a product, services, or mindset, books, and I love it because it gives me the opportunity to get to know more kindred spirits, but at the same time, helping one another. Collaboration and networking for me are two important things that we must continue to drive in order to come together. Unity, love, compassion, all the wonderful feelings.
Nice. I love it. Well, I will link, I'll get some information about your show, and I'll link, so people can, in the show notes, wherever someone is listening to this, so they can find you on LinkedIn, and then they can check out your show. It's, you said it's every weekend, every Saturday?
Every Saturday at 11 Eastern Standard Time. So we're talking about New York, East Coast. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, not Japan Standard Time. It's midnight here, but yeah, I still try to check it when I can. Well, that's all, folks.
Yeah.
Go check out what Raquel Flores has got going on. Go check out Raquel Flores Connection Corner on the weekend. Do that first. And then if you've still got the podcast itch, go over to zensammich.com, and you can listen to over 150 episodes now. And you can help out this show. There's two ways to do that there. Both of them work. One of them's PayPal, one of them's Patreon. I got to keep the lights on. I got to pay the bills. So every little bit helps. Raquel, thank you so much for your time today. I knew it would be awesome. We could do this 3 hours. We have done this 3 hours before.
We have. We have.
I've got a few more limitations on this show, but I really appreciate your time. It's always enlightening every time I talk to you.
It has been a pleasure, Mark. You know that you always bring the Zen absolutely into every conversation. You always bring that clarity, and it's always a joy to speak to you. It's an honor, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm sure this will be the first of many.
Absolutely.